Okay guys, so in this video I thought I was going to touch very briefly on gradients and the basics of gradients. So let's get into that. So on this page we have two gradients. We have a linear gradient that flows from top down, and then we have a radial gradient that is just a circle that kind of spans outwards. And the basics of a gradient is that you have these nice functions. You have a linear gradient function and you have a radial gradient function. And the basics of a gradient is virtually that you declare first and foremost a positioning, or that is technically optional, but we will look at an example where I actually use the positioning property or the positioning parameter to declare where I want the gradient to start, and that has actually quite a lot of impact. But for now we're just going to focus on what we call color stops. So a color stop is just me declaring that I want a color to be applied between 2 points. I want to say, by saying that I want an RGBA applied with basically it's just a black with a slight hint of transparency. I want that to go from 0%, in other words the 0 mark of the gradient, up to 10% and stop. And then I want from 10% to 30%, I want to get a little bit less transparent. And then finally between 30 and 50% I want to get even less transparent, until finally the final one is just black, which is declared, that basically means that from 50% all the way to 100% of the gradients, like the length of the gradient, I'm going to go and become completely black, or get the color filled out as black. But you can also declare a positioning. If you don't want the gradient to just have an angle of 0 degrees to go from the top down in this scenario, you can actually, there are also keywords where you can specify, like if you wanted to flow from upwards downwards or downwards upwards, and there's tons of these properties. But for, say, just angling it, you can use something like this, where you can just declare a degree. And now you can see that the gradient is actually flowing from the left over to the right. And let's just walk through it. So here I'm saying that, okay, from the 0% mark, in other words, the absolute start of the gradient, I want to be yellow up until 10%. So 10% all the way up here. And then I want to slowly fade over to become between 10% and 30%. I want it to go green. So now we have our color green here. And then finally between green and blue, I just want there to be this, like, as you see, I go over to at roughly the 50% mark, I'm going to be completely blue. And then between the 50% mark and the rest of the flow, which is in this case the whole page, I want to go over to and become black. And these are the basic ideas. The thing you need to remember here, as I said, it's the positioning, where from which degree or from which angle you want your flow to start, and then everything else is basically just colors and positions. I mean, I can strip this away like that, and all of a sudden you have a different flow. So you can have as many breakpoints as you want, or as few as you want. I can go all the way and just say that, hey, I don't want any of that. I just want this basic color scheme here, and that basically becomes the effect, right? Oh, sorry, like that. So now I just have two colors. And that's about it, really. But let's remove that for now and just keep the original. And then let's have a look at the radial gradient, where you have a very similar approach, where you have a positioning, first and foremost, where you can position something. Now this is just a basic, like a default. I can actually remove this, or I can do something like this. I can say 40 pixels times 40 pixels. And this positioning works very similar to the way that you would expect the transform property, or basically the background positioning, how that's going to work. So it's just a way for me to declare how I want to position the center point of the radial gradient on my canvas, or like on the element that I actually apply this to. But let's keep it simple for now. So I'm just going to say that I want an ellipse at the center of my element. So that's going to put it square in the middle of this little element that's down here. We can actually look at that. So it's this element that's here, which is just a little bit before tag under the text, right? And then it's very similar to the way that the linear gradient works, where I declare a color stop point, and that's going to be black until 15%, and then between 15% and 22% I'm going to go completely white, and then between these two, up until 70%, I'm going to fade out the white and make it completely transparent. And that's why you see that, all right, so the color starts at completely black up until roughly 15%, and then it starts to slowly fade out, and then you have this little white ring here. This is where the the white actually kicks in, and the rest of the whole flow is up to 70% of the total element's width. I'm going to fade out and be completely transparent, and here in the outskirts it's now black because, you know, completely transparent is going to give me the background color of the page. So that's virtually it. And you can also play around a little bit with like positioning and say, like, let's say for the sake of argument that I didn't want to be in the center of things. I want to be at the farthest corner. Then I can do something like this, where I'm now placed the center point. As you can see, this becomes kind of sharp, but now my radial gradient center point is at the top here, and it flows outwards. And I also took the liberty of just changing the color a little bit here, so you can see that I can actually do, like, let's make that gray or something. And now you can see that the colors, once again, they kind of flow in the same manner as you saw in the linear gradient. And of course we can play around with these pixel values and like move it around a little bit. I can move this a little bit, so just to get a bit of an offset depending on where I want my center point to be in relationship to my positioning property, which is in this case the farthest corner. And yeah, this is the basics of gradients, guys. What I want you to take with you here is that you can play around with the positioning a little bit, but the most important part to remember here is that remember these color stop points, because that's the way that the gradient is going to work, where you simply declare at what thresholds you want what color to be applied, and you can have as many as you want or as few as you want, basically. And yeah, that's the essence of gradients. Have a great day.